Welcome to Future History Stories. Stories that spark the imagination about what the future might hold. Now, let's go back and see what happened in 2030. The name of quantum computers had been spoken of for years. In magazines, at conferences, even in TV shows. But in reality, they never really worked. Every experiment collapsed after a few seconds, qubits destabilized, hopes faded. Scientists began their speeches with, "A revolution is coming," only to quietly leave the laboratory afterward. The quantum computer had become one of humanity's greatest dreams, and also one of its greatest disappointments. But what happened in 2030 that suddenly changed everything? Why, in that year, did the graphs finally hold steady? And how did humanity, almost without realizing it, step through the doorway of a new era? Now, I will take you back to that year, into the cold rooms of the laboratories, to the moment when scientists held their breath, and to the night when humanity quietly crossed a threshold. In your phone, in your laptop, even in the device you reusing to listen to these words, they all follow the same principle: 0 and 1. On or off, black or white, clear and definite. But the quantum world is entirely different. Their reality does not give a single answer. A qubit can be both 0 and 1 at the same time. Like a coin spinning in the air, showing both heads and tails at once. This property is called superposition, and then there is entanglement. When two qubits are connected, the distance between them no longer matters. What happens to one, happens to the other. Some called it the invisible thread of the universe. Others, the strangest secret of physics. But one thing was certain: if used correctly, this property meant incredible power. The problem was, that power was extremely fragile. Qubits require an almost untouchable environment. A vibration, a fluctuation in temperature, even a single cosmic ray from space could destroy them. People dreamed of them lasting for minutes, but most collapsed in just seconds. That is why quantum computers inspired hope for years, but ended in disappointment. New devices were built, millions of dollars were spent, but the graphs were always the same. A line rising for a few seconds, then quickly falling away. By 2030, the quantum computer was still a promise of miracles. But at the same time, it had become a heavy burden on the weary shoulders of the scientific world. And everyone was asking the same question: will these machines ever truly work, or will they remain a dream forever? In different corners of the world, the lights of laboratories were still burning. Behind glass walls, in silent rooms, a handful of scientists stared at their screens. The atmosphere was almost completely silent. The only sound was the deep hum of the supercoolers. Liquid helium rushed through massive pipes, keeping the machines' hearts at -270 degrees, because qubits could only exist in this frozen silence. On one screen, the lines of a graph trembled. Countless times before, the line had risen only to fall again. Each time, hope had vanished, and the room emptied in disappointment. But tonight felt different. One engineer could not take his eyes off the numbers. Beside him, a young researcher had even stopped tapping her pen on the desk, holding her breath instead. The entire energy of the room was focused on a single, glowing display. Seconds passed, then a minute, then another, and the line did not fall. For the first time, the qubits held steady. For the first time, the error rate stayed under control. At that moment, after years of effort, the entire room exchanged silent glances. No one clapped, no one shouted, because they all knew this moment would quietly change the course of history. A threshold had been crossed, and humanity's future would never be the same again. Why? After years of collapsing within seconds, did the qubits stay stable for minutes? The answer was a new material discovered that very year. After countless trials, after hundreds of failed formulas, scientists had finally created a shield suited to the fragile heart of the quantum world. To the untrained eye, it looked like nothing more than a dull gray piece of metal. But for the qubits placed inside it, X47 was like an invisible cocoon, where once a tiny vibration from the outside world would shatter them. Now under the protection of X47, they could last for minutes, even hours. This changed the fate of quantum computing forever. X47 was not just a new material. It was the reward of human patience, the embodiment of years of persistence, of scientists refusing to give up after every failure. That night, in the silence of the lab, the graph holding steady on the screen was whispering one thing. Quantum computers are no longer just a dream. Now, they work. And that small victory was the beginning of much greater changes, specifically drug discovery. Normally, it takes years to know whether a new drug will work. Billions of molecules must be tested, combinations calculated. Classical computers can only scan a fraction of those possibilities. The rest vanish into the darkness of time. But in 2030, for the first time, a quantum computer handled the entire problem at once. A molecule designed as a potential cancer drug was tested in hours instead of days. The numbers appearing on the screen were more than data. Behind them was the hope of a child, the tears of a mother. In a quiet hospital room, a doctor looked at the report and could not hide his astonishment. Because a drug once called impossible was now a real candidate. The family standing by the patient's side did not know how. But that night, the invisible calculations of a quantum computer had saved a life, and this was only the beginning. That same day, similar reports were being prepared in other labs. Heart disease, rare genetic disorders, sleep conditions. For all of them, new solutions could now be found much faster. The first great victory of quantum computers had touched humanity directly, and without realizing it, humanity had quietly stepped into the future of medicine. Imagine a harbor on a quiet morning. Sky is still gray, the lights of the cranes still glowing. Hundreds of ships prepare to move at once, which carries thousands of tons of cargo. But which route will consume the least fuel? Which path will be safest? These questions had strained classical computers for years. In 2030, quantum computers solved this massive problem in minutes. Maps were redrawn, routes recalculated. The result was simple: shorter journeys, less fuel, cleaner seas. Captains didn't even realize it, but the invisible intelligence guiding their ships had changed. That same day, on the other side of the world, an energy grid was reprogrammed. Losses in the system were minimized by quantum calculations. Lights that once flickered now glowed steadily. Energy in homes became cheaper, cities brighter and calmer. And all of this happened without fanfare. A newspaper wrote, "The quantum era has begun." But everyday life felt ever so slightly adjusted, like an invisible hand smoothing the edges. People walking the streets, families preparing dinner, an old man dozing off in front of the TV, all lived in a world that was suddenly more efficient, more peaceful, without even knowing it. This was the impact of quantum computing, silent but profound. And that silence had begun to change human habits forever. But the change of 2030 was like a whisper. For people walking in the street, nothing looked different. Markets were open, buses kept running, children played in schoolyards. But in the hidden details, the world had already changed. An elderly woman buying her medicine at a pharmacy paid less, because production was faster and cheaper. She didn't know quantum computers had made that possible, but she felt the difference in her wallet. In one city, traffic lights worked more smoothly. Thanks to quantum calculations, congestion was better managed. Drivers didn't think about it, but their commutes were less stressful. At night, lights turned on in apartments. Electricity that once flickered now flowed steadily. No one realized quantum algorithms were behind it, but everyone enjoyed a calmer evening. The world was changing through small, quiet adjustments. A subtle comfort spread through the ordinary rhythm of life. And most importantly, no one noticed the revolution. That is why 2030 went down in history as a silent threshold. Because great changes don't always begin with noise. Sometimes they begin with whispers. No fireworks in the squares, no special broadcasts on TV. But humanity had experienced one of the quietest revolutions in history. Quantum computers were finally working, and this was the start of an irreversible change. Most people never realized it, but the world was now moving faster, invisibly. Calculations were more accurate, decisions wiser, solutions quicker. In one city, lights glowed more steadily. In one hospital, hope of recovery had increased. In one harbor, ships sailed more safely. All of this happened while no one thought about the words quantum computer. But everyone felt life becoming just a little easier. This is how true revolutions are. They slip into daily life unnoticed. They show themselves in small details. And one morning, people ask the same question. When did we change so much? The answer of 2030 was simple. It all began with a tiny graph that refused to fall in a laboratory. But the real question was only beginning. Because quantum computers would not remain working alone. Very soon they would merge with humanity's most powerful invention, artificial intelligence. And then the silent threshold would give way to a giant leap. That would be the story of 2031.